In psychology, the study of experiences, behaviors, and mental processes is undertaken scientifically. The methods of inquiry in psychology would include, first of all, the goals of inquiry, then the various steps in conducting the research, the nature of data, some important methods that the researcher uses, analysis of data, limitations, and ethical issues. So, what are the goals? Why do we conduct psychological inquiries? The first goal of psychological inquiry is description. Psychologists try and describe a behavior or a psychological phenomena as accurately as possible. This is important so that the behavior or phenomena is clearly differentiated from other behaviors and phenomena. A psychologist also needs to specify the particular aspects of the behavior or phenomena he or she proposes to study. For example, a psychologist may study the frequency of the behavior in the picture. This is the second goal of scientific inquiry. Once a psychologist understands and is able to describe behavior, he or she would be able to predict likely future patterns of behavior. This helps in managing behaviors and situations better. The third goal of psychological inquiry is to find the causal factors of a particular behavior or psychological phenomena. Psychologists also look at situations in which the behavior under consideration does not occur. This helps establish cause-effect relationships between variables that may be specific objects or events. Once the cause of a particular behavior or phenomena is known, the behavior can be controlled by controlling the conditions that lead to it. For example, psychological therapies help bring about changes in people by controlling their responses or managing their stimulus. Application. The final goal of psychological inquiry is to use the knowledge gained to make people's lives better. Psychologists not only offer support to people suffering from mental health issues, but suggest preventive ways and ways to enhance quality of life for all people. Let's now look at the various steps in conducting research. The various steps in conducting research include conceptualization of the problem, developing hypotheses, collection of data, drawing conclusions, and revising research conclusions and theory. But before we move on to the steps of a scientific research, it is important to understand the following. The scientific study conducted should be carried out in a systematic and objective manner so that the study can be replicated by other researchers as well, which means that if other scientists independently carry out the same study, they should arrive more or less at the same conclusion. The first step is to select a topic for study. The researcher can review the earlier studies carried out in the area and arrive at a specific problem for the study. The topic of study may range from one's own and other individuals to group and organizational behaviors in any given situation. Example, why do we forget? Developing hypothesis. Once the problem is identified, the tentative solution or the likely solution statements called hypotheses are written down. The researcher would then try and prove in his or her study whether the statement is true or not. The next step is collecting data. The researcher needs to create a research design before the data is collected. The design should include the number of participants, the target population, method of data collection, tools which include questionnaires, etc., to be used, and the procedure for data collection. This is the blueprint or the master plan of the entire study and must be clearly laid down. This is an example of a framework of research design. The next step is drawing conclusions. This step involves an analysis of the collected data using statistical procedures. The analysis can be done using available softwares like SPSS, etc., and the results presented graphically in the form of pie charts, bar graphs, etc., and in tabular form, which is in the form of tables with rows and columns. Step 4 is revising research conclusions. The researcher finally needs to see whether his or her conclusions support the hypothesis. If yes, the theory is confirmed. If not, he or she needs to revise the hypothesis and test it again. Let's now look at the nature of data. The data may be in the form of demographic information, physical information, physiological data, or psychological information. Demographic information. Demography refers to the statistical information about populations. Demographical information examples include age, gender, marital status, income, ethnicity, employment, birth order, etc. Physical information. This includes information like ecological conditions like terrain, weather conditions, housing, neighboring environment, and other living conditions. Physiological data includes details like height, weight, heart rate, blood pressure, sleep patterns, stamina, etc. Psychological information includes information related to areas like intelligence, personality, creativity, values, illusions, perceptual experiences, etc. Let's now have a look at some important methods. The important methods include observation method, experimental method, correlational research, survey research, psychological testing, and case study. In a scientific observation, the observer selects which behavior to observe, records what he or she observes, and analyzes the observations to derive some meaning out of them. For example, observing a child's behavior as he plays. Types of observation: naturalistic versus controlled observation. Observation done in a subject's natural settings, for example, observing a student in school, is called naturalistic observation. The researcher makes no effort of any kind to control or interfere in the settings. In contrast, observations that are controlled in, say, laboratory settings are called controlled observations. Non-participant versus participant observation. In non-participant observation, the researcher does not participate in the event to be observed. He or she observes from a distance. In participant observation, the observer becomes a part of the group or event being observed.